Slimekeep. You just relaunched it in April, and it's sitting at very positive on Steam.
I still wouldn't say I'm an expert developer.
Is it even worth it to start a YouTube in your mind?
YouTube, game development was so different back then.
If you do another commercial game, where do you think you would spend your time marketing-wise?
Our marketing strategy is very, very different this time.
Today, I sat down with the prolific Ben Bonk. I got to talk to him about what it's like being one of the biggest YouTube game devers on the platform, his recent release of Slimekeep, his first commercial game, which he spent over 5 years on, and everything he's up to today and what it's like being a game dev. I really enjoyed this conversation and learned a ton, and I'm super excited to share it. If you enjoy the content, please hit subscribe just to let YouTube know that you're enjoying it, and let's go. Where does your obsession with green come from?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think it's kind of funny because I think a lot of people think that green is my favorite color and stuff, but I'm not even sure if I would say it's even my favorite color. But it's more just the fact that when I was kind of starting to develop games a few years back, I was kind of looking for limited color palettes because I kind of just liked the look of color palettes or limited color palettes per se. And, I found a few, but the ones that really stood out to me were the green limited color palettes. So there's just 4 colors. And, I thought the green ones looked the best. So I kind of just, started using those palettes in my games. And that's where the kind of love came from.
Yeah, well, it creates a super unique identifiable style. And for anybody that's not familiar with your work, I'm referring to the monogreen color palette that you use in Slimekeep and a couple other games that you've released. But Slimekeep, you just relaunched in April, and it's sitting at very positive on Steam with 98 reviews. And I think this was your first commercial game launch, and it looks like you also worked on it for over 5 years. So did the launch for Slimekeep meet your expectations?
Yeah, so I mean, I really had no clue what to expect when I launched Slimekeep. I mean, the game launched with about 20,000 wish lists, so I was, pretty optimistic. I was wondering if, what percentage of wish lists were going to convert there, and I also didn't know how my YouTube channel would affect sales and everything. And I think financially, it probably wasn't the biggest success. I kind of made a video talking about the finances on Slimekeep, and if you're curious, but I'd say financially, it didn't do amazingly well. But it sold a decent amount of copies still, and more so, people seemed to enjoy the game, which, or at least for the most part, which was very cool. But more than anything, I think it was a learning experience for me. I mean, it was, as you said, my first commercial project, and I spent 5 years on that project, which honestly, looking back, probably wasn't really necessary, and I would not recommend spending so long on your first commercial project like I did. But even though, the sales probably could have been better, and I was probably working for, far, far, far less than minimum wage for the amount of time I put into the game, just the fact that I learned so much about game development that I'm now applying into my future projects is very helpful, I would say. And so launch wise, I mean, yeah, it did decently well. I wasn't really sure what to expect completely, but it all turned out well in the end, and I'm really just happy I made it and got it out in the world at the end of the day.
Yeah, I mean, launching anything is a success, and sticking with a project for that long is also a huge success. During development and then also now, would you call yourself like a hobby developer, or is it your full-time thing, or where does game dev fall for you?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm still a student in college. I'm still I would say it's still a hobby for me, although I would say very I don't know if hobby is the right word because it is kind of my main thing that I spend, the vast majority of my free time on. So in a sense, it's not like I'm doing these games for a living, and I'm not sure if I want to do them for a living. I think, it's kind of tough when you have to make video games and you have to financially support yourself with just the proceeds from making your games. And I think that can kind of affect development and really kind of create a stressful environment. So nothing wrong with being an indie game developer and trying to make that a career path. But I just enjoy the situation I'm in right now just because I'm still in school and I'm still learning stuff. And, I don't know where I'll be post graduation, but I enjoy just spending a lot of my free time working on games and making games, which I find very enjoyable to do. And I dedicate, lots of my free time to it. So, you know, as for since it's not my job or anything right now, but it is almost like a full-time job or at least a part-time job in a way, as I do spend, probably at least 20 hours a week working on games and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm always so curious just to hear where game dev falls in people's life.
Yeah.
So that gives us a really good perspective of where you were at. Now, Slimekeep also, I think you said started as a Ludum Dare game, right?
Yes, it did. Ludum Dare 46 is where it started.
Yeah. So can you give us a little background on just like, I don't think it was the first game you've ever made. So how did you come about the decision to actually work on that long term? And was it like a super conscious decision or did it just kind of keep growing?
Yeah, so it wasn't a conscious decision at all. Actually, before Ludum Dare, it was well, essentially I can run it down. It was COVID, and I always wanted to do some game jams, so I did one game jam before Ludum Dare. I did pretty well in that, and then my first game jam, I actually ended up winning it. There's only around 70 participants, but still, I was like, oh wow, game jams are really fun. So COVID hit, and I was out of school and had all this free time. And so then, I found out about the Ludum Dare game jam and I was like, okay, might as well try this. And so then I participated in the Ludum Dare game jam and made Slimekeep. And I really don't think the jam version was anything special at all. It wasn't a bad game, I'd say, but there's definitely, I don't think it was lightning in a bottle. And for most people, I'd say, unless you really, think you have a game concept from a game jam that's like really a good base, um, maybe it's not always worth it to continue developing it out. But and so in this case, I don't know if it was the right decision necessarily, but I'm glad I did because I uploaded a YouTube devlog on it, and I'd been making a few devlogs on the time. I was actually working on another project, which was supposed to be my first commercial project. This untitled game where it's going to be like a hacker game, also in the limited color palette. And so I was working on this supposedly commercial game. Ludum Dare comes along. I start making this Slimekeep Jam version, and then I release it. And then I make a video about it. And pretty much the main reason why I continued to develop Slimekeep over this hacker game is that the video did really well on my YouTube channel. I remember I only had like maybe 1,000 or 2,000 subscribers at the time. And that video, I would watch it go from 5,000 to 10,000 to 20,000. Then I think for a long time it settled around 50,000 views, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And YouTube game development was so different back then. I mean, that video that I made looking back was so bad. It was not a good video at all. But just because there wasn't really, a ton of supply of game dev content at the time, the video kind of took off. And so I was like, okay, well, people are watching this, why don't I just turn this into a bigger game? And so I kind of just naively dove into it, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna just, continue working on this game. I had no clue what it was gonna be. I didn't know, where I was gonna take it. I was just like, I'm gonna update it some, and I didn't really have a clear vision whatsoever. And so I just basically, because I had that YouTube response and I got a lot of comments on the jam version, I was like, okay, well, I'll continue updating it. But I didn't even know it's going to be a roguelike for the longest time. I kept on just kind of throwing stuff in there. So to the very long-winded answer that I just gave you is no, I didn't necessarily have a plan to develop it for much after the jam version, but just because the YouTube algorithm decided to pick it up, I decided to kind of ride that wave, and that's how it all got started.
Yeah, I mean, following what people are interested in just sounds like a great idea. And, regardless of financial outcomes, it's definitely boosted your channel and been super successful for your channel. Now, it leads me into something I really wanted to ask you about, and that you've been on YouTube for a while now, and you mentioned it was different. Do you think for people that are either starting game dev now, or let's just say just for people that are kind of newer-ish to game dev, is it even worth it to start a YouTube in your mind?
Yeah, so I would say it depends on what your priorities are. I'd say if you like making videos, if that's like genuinely something you like doing, then sure, like go make videos and do it. But also, I think you have to understand that making videos, it does eat into your game development time. So it's a lot to do. Game development is kind
Mhm.
of a big enough job in itself, and then also having to make thumbnails and editing and the whole video creation process is a lot of big time commitment. And, it also depends. I think YouTube, it's cool to have a channel that's like successful and stuff, but also I think you have to consider that just from like a marketing perspective, one of the big things I learned from Slimekeep's launch is just because you're getting, 20 or 30,000 views a video consistently does not mean that 20 or 30,000 people are gonna, you know, play or purchase your game at launch. And maybe that's part of it. Maybe part of that is because I spent 5 years on Slimekeep and I think the development kind of got dragged out. So maybe some people lost interest over time. But still, in general, I think if you're just about, pure marketing perspective, I don't think devlogs are probably the most efficient use of your time or doing YouTube videos. Just because a lot of people who watch your videos, doesn't always necessarily correlate to sales as well as you might think. I mean, I that's just from what I've learned, and I've also heard that from some other game dev YouTubers. But there obviously are success stories. But I think it just depends what your priorities are. Like I'd say if you don't like to make videos, don't force yourself to make videos. Just focus on making a cool game and focus your marketing efforts. Otherwise, just maybe do the Steam festivals and Steam Next Fest and other avenues for marketing it. But if you like to make videos, go for it. It just depends on what you want to do with your channel. But I will also say, I'll kind of another long-winded answer here, but it also has um, changed a lot. The scene has definitely changed a lot since I got started because I think if I uploaded my first video that kind of took my channel off today, no one would watch it just because Gamedev YouTube has gotten so much more competitive and there's so many more people in the scene now. And I think one of the only reasons my channel kind of started to take off 5 years ago was just because there wasn't nearly as much competition. It was still kind of new, but now, there's so many more people. And so I think the barrier of entry is definitely higher than it used to be at least.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I've been curious to ask people that, especially ones that are kind of established on YouTube, and that seems to be kind of the common advice of like, if you have some reason to be making videos, go ahead, but don't think it's going to be like this awesome road to like a gold mine of people buying your game or
Yeah.
something. Um, now that you have some experience launching a game, if you do another commercial game, where do you think you would spend your time marketing wise?
Yeah, so that's actually perfectly kind of leads into my next project that I've just started working on. I kind of just announced it last week, I think. And I'm just kind of continuing similar story to Slimekeep. And I'm continuing developing this game called Wrangler Ranch, which we made for the Game Makers Toolkit Game Jam, me and another developer. And our marketing strategy is very, very different this time. What we're mostly trying to do now is focus on like the Steam festivals and contacting content creators, because at the end of the day, those
Mhm.
Steam Next Fests and those like our game, we're very lucky for it to be animal based, and there's like an animal fest upcoming, so we're going to do that. And we're also launching a demo, and that's another marketing push. And then Steam Next Fest is hopefully another marketing fest or push. And then also reaching out to lots of content creators and that sort of thing. So we're definitely focusing, me and my partner on this project are focusing a lot less on the actual YouTube side for marketing because, you know, it helps a bit, sure, but at the end of the day, a lot of people who are on YouTube and watch your videos, as I said, aren't going to be the people that actually buy your games. So we're definitely switching to more of those more tried and true methods. And there's like, I'm sure, some people listening have heard of Chris Zukowski. He has a lot of kind of tips on, indie game marketing and such. And he kind of says that same rhetoric that like the Steam Next Fest and Steam festivals and Steam events, whatever it is, like that's how you get wish lists. That's how you get your games to blow up. It's not, making a YouTube post or whatnot. So definitely
Right.
switching gears on that front for the next project.
Yeah, and you mentioned you're working with a partner on this project. How are you guys divvying up the work? Are you kind of like, do you have specific roles, or are you just both kind of doing everything? How's that working?
Yeah, it's a very different process because I'm not used to working with another developer in that sense because I've been doing Slimekeep was an independent project for the most part. I mean, I had some external help,
Yeah.
but this is a very different process, and we're both developers, and so we're both kind of just we have pretty frequent calls at least once or twice a week to talk about like overall state and what we're working on, and then we have our kind of Trello board. And then we just have, we discuss our tasks and kind of just assign stuff to ourselves on what we're going to work on. And we just kind of decide like, okay, here's what needs to get done. I'll take this, you take this. And we kind of just split it up to like that. I think we both work, around the same amount, which is nice. And so it's definitely a lot of kind of trust-based system, but we at the end of the day, I think we have a good relationship and we both kind of pull our share of the work and get stuff done. But pretty much it just comes down to, having a Trello board and just being like, uh, let's just work on this, you work on this, and let's, keep in touch and keep the communication line open. But also this is a smaller project. We're only gonna work on it for another month or two. At least that's the plan right now, and just do a early release and just polish up our game jam version and just get it out on Steam and mobile devices. So I'm sure the process would look different for a like full 3-year long development experience, but that's what we're doing for our short term development.
I think it's Jonas Tyroller that says to him, the ideal setup is like a really small team that gets along, and he enjoys that more than working solo. Now, I know you've had like obviously a 5-year project versus a super short one is hard to compare, but do you think you'll come out on the other end of this feeling the same way, or do you maybe lean towards solo for long-term projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think the bigger thing is, is if you can find someone that you're, good, that you have a good working relationship with, and I think that with my current game development partner named X-Ray Dev, I think we have a very good working relationship, and we're both very similar as developers, and so I definitely really enjoy working with him. For the long time, I was thinking like, oh, I'm kind of just a solo dev. But this project has definitely made me a lot more open to working with other people, as long as you're kind of on the same mindset, because it's very nice to, obviously with game dev, there's stuff you want to do and you don't want to do. And so sometimes if I'm like really tired, I'm working on something, I can just say, hey, can you take a look at this? And then, it's nice because it feels like there's always constantly progress and things just move so much faster than if you're solo. Because if you're solo, you have to do everything, and there's a lot of like redundant stuff you don't want to have to do, but you can kind of divvy up that boring stuff, and so it makes it more manageable. So I definitely agree with Jonas there and say, yeah, working with a small team I think is a really good experience if you can form a good team there.
Yeah, very nice. Now, I do want to jump back to Slimekeep for a minute. I have a couple more things I'd be really curious about. Obviously, 5 years is such a long project. What was your biggest challenge throughout the development of Slimekeep?
My biggest challenge, there was, I'd say, lots of challenges. I would say the overall biggest thing I probably struggled with was just knowing, I think early on, just knowing what the project was going to be, because as I kind of mentioned, I didn't have a really solid plan. And so for a long time, just early into development, I didn't really know what I was doing or what the project was going to be. And so I kind of just randomly throw systems in without knowing, how they're going to work or contribute to the overall bigger picture. And so a lot of those systems, kind of bit me in the back later on and just kind of created a lot of annoyances. So that was probably the biggest challenge for me. But I mean, I also faced many other challenges, like a lot of the code, I was still learning how to code at the time, and just I didn't really have great code architecture, and so there's a lot of just really messy spaghetti code. So that was not fun to deal with, especially later on in development. But that, and also, I mean, motivation is also a hard thing. I mean, I think I stayed pretty well motivated, but at the end of the day, it's to do it for so long is it's not always fun. There's Game development is a rewarding process, I think, over time. But there are parts of it, like with anything, that are just, hard and really mundane stuff. And you run into bugs and challenges and you feel like you're making no progress. And just overcoming all that was, really tough. So there was definitely lots of challenges, but, this was my first big commercial game. And I don't think you should spend 5 years on your first commercial game. So maybe some of those challenges were amplified a bit there. But overall, I'd say just, yeah, not having a solid plan early on would probably kind of cascaded down to create a lot of uh, challenges for me overall in development.
Well, even with those challenges, it's just so impressive to finish any game. So, yeah, I really just admire that you stuck with it even through
Thank
those.
you.
Now that you're like more established and you're a person that's launched a commercial game to quite a bit of success, how are you thinking about your skills as a developer and whether it be programming or art or design or even business? What do you think the things are that you feel like you're really good at, and what are the things where you're, like, trying to maybe shore up as some weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the end of the day, for me, I feel like I'm still, even though I have made these games and stuff, I would still wouldn't say I'm an expert developer by any means. I mean, I can make video games and such, but I'm not, there's definitely people that are much more like technically better than me, and like they know how to write cleaner code and they know how to write better, faster code and such. And so I don't think I really spent a ton of time, learning all these best practices, maybe as much as I should have. But at the end of the day, I kind of just like to make stuff. And so I'm kind of just prioritizing, like, I just want to make stuff. Haven't really spent a ton of time learning, some of the, trying to get the best at a certain skill, I should say. So like I think, art is something that I think I'm okay at it, but I don't think I'm great at it. I'm sure if I spent, some time just really honing in trying to get better at art to be better at it. So I think I'm kind of mediocre-ish there. I think programming, I've gotten better, that's for sure. But I still wouldn't say like I'm a fantastic programmer, like, by any means. I mean, I can make simple games, but if you wanted me to do some complex physics thing, I don't think I'd even know where to start. I think I've gotten pretty good at the project management side of things, though, I'd say. I mean, because with Slimekeep, I had to manage lots of playtesters and coordinate all of them and coordinate artists. So I think that was a skill I kind of acquired that I wasn't really expecting to. I think I've also learned. I think I've gotten better at the business side of things also, just because at the end of the day, whether you like it or not, game development is a business, so you have to know how to like set up all these bank accounts and LLCs and everything. It's all kind of a mess, but I feel like I've gotten pretty decent at that, and I still find that somewhat interesting. So overall, I mean, I would say I've I've maybe my technical skills have I've gotten better over the course of the project, but they're still not um, super amazing or anything. I just kind of like to make games. And at the end of the day, I don't think you need the most technical skills to make most games. Um, I would say if there's anything I'm weak at, um, probably maybe sometimes design wise, I get kind of stuck on things. Like, is this a good system or not? And I am kind of struggle with that. So that's why I think it's really important to kind of play test stuff early on and and that sort of thing. I could always be better. It's maybe a bit vague, but overall, I mean, yeah, I think it's important to realize that if you're a game developer, if you're watching a game developer and such, it's not like they're masters at everything. Because I mean, a lot of it is, I think, hard work and just passion for something. Kind of at the end of the day, uh, outweighs skill sometimes or just natural ability. So I think for me personally, I think I'm very good at sticking with something and having dedication and working hard towards it even if sometimes my technical skills or my game development skills might not be as good as someone else.
Yeah, I think being good at project management is such a huge asset. And it's probably because for game devs, especially in like the solo or very small team world, it doesn't feel like something super creative. Do you have any advice or, just thinking about the way you work and what makes you good at that for someone that feels like they don't get at all excited about it and that's like the hard part for them? Do you have any advice for them?
Are you talking about in terms of project management advice?
Yeah, project management or just, whatever you meant when you said that that's part of what you're good at. You mentioned managing playtesters and also operating Trello boards with your partner. It kind of anything under that umbrella of just like keeping the project going.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, at the end of the day, it's not flashy and it's not fun, and it feels kind of weird because you're like, "Oh, well, why do I have to plan all this stuff out and make Trello tasks and that kind of stuff?" Because it's not actual development, and so it feels weird, like if it's your first time doing that sort of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think there's a quote that's like 5 minutes of planning will save you 5 hours or something along those lines, which is true because just, being able to manage a project, especially as it grows in scope, is just so crucial, or else it'll just turn into a mess so quickly. And you really don't understand the importance of it until you've, been like me and kind of dive into a project without managing it super well. And so it's one of those things kind of similar to like writing clean code where you don't really see the benefits necessarily, but if you're, doing it correctly, but if you don't do it correctly later on or eventually you'll see, the pitfalls. And so it's one of those things where you just kind of have to trust that it's an important thing to get better at and actually focus on because even if it feels unnecessary and weird in the moment, just having that planning early on really will save you headaches down the line.
Yeah, that's a super helpful perspective. Now I do want to jump back. I have one last question about Slimekeep before we move to something else. Now in the similar games on Steam, Slimekeep is paired up with some super successful indie games like Binding of Isaac, Dead Cells, and Noita, just to name a few. Did you do anything strategically to get that to happen, or does it just kind of happen?
Yeah, so that's all just Steam tagging, I believe. So whenever you, set up your Steam page, you put the tags on there that are like action roguelike, roguelike, or deck builder, 2D, whatever it is. And so I think that was just, as happenstance of me just putting similar tags. It's not like I copied those tags. I just put, what I believe Slimekeep was. And you kind of rank them also by importance. So like my first tag is action roguelike because I think that describes Slimekeep the best. And so, probably sees Binding of Isaac is also an action roguelike and it has similar tags. And so that's where it kind of pulls from that. And so um, you know, I wouldn't say it's. I don't think Binding of Isaac is going to show Slimekeep on its page or anything, unfortunately. But I think that's just how the Steam algorithm works in that way. And so I didn't do anything super special to get it to do it there. It's just Steam tagging and the algorithm trying to figure out what your game is similar to.
Okay, well, that's super helpful. Yeah, I know the tagging is super important just from listening to like Chris Zukowski, but I was just curious if that just kind of worked out or if there was like a particular strategy.
No strategy, just
Now
just
I want to,
put the tags that I hoped, and
yeah,
yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, and part of that is choosing a good genre,
Yeah.
right? Like you're picking a genre that has the potential to be, in those caliber of games.
Yeah.
Now I want to go back in time a little bit to a young Ben
Mm.
Bonk. What was it that either games or other media, how did you first kind of get inspired to do game dev? Do you remember?
Yeah, I don't exactly the remember the exact moment that I was like, I really want to make video games, but I think it was just kind of a natural thing for me because, I would always play video games growing up. And I think for anyone who consumes enough of something, eventually it's natural for them to be like, well, I wonder if I could make this, myself. If you watch a bunch of TV, maybe you're like, oh, I wonder if I can make my own TV show. Or so for me, I play a lot of video games, so I was like, well, I wonder if I can make my own video games. And so I think I kind of just got really interested in that back in middle school. I started doing my first few things in Scratch, and kind of took some programming classes and found that interesting. And it's not like I was incredibly fascinated by programming or that sense. And I was like, oh, I really want, think computer science is cool. It was more just so, I think I want to learn programming because that's how I make video games. And so that was, it was always kind of games before programming mindset for me, at least early on. And so, I just played lots of video games, and then I was just really wanted to start making them myself. So I did some Scratch projects, and then, I kind of dove into Unity. And at first I kind of hated Unity and I couldn't figure it out. And I did a course and I just got bored of it. I kind of quit and I took some breaks and then came back to it. And it took a lot for me to kind of actually get my teeth into it, starting off, because I think it is just kind of hard, especially if you're trying to get into game development without a programming background. And so that was a lot to take in for me at the time, learning game development and programming at the same time. But eventually I was like, I know this is not fun now, but I got to stick with it. And, eventually I can, start to make my own games, because I was kind of stuck in, just watching tutorials and I didn't know anything. I would write this code and I had no clue how it actually worked. And I was just following tutorials all day, and it was not a fun process. But I was like, I don't know, I just got to stick with this because I know it'll be worth it. And then I still remember like one of my first games where everything kind of just clicked, and I was like, hey, I can kind of start to make stuff now without having to follow a tutorial for anything. And so that was really fun for me. And then I kind of just, went in from there, and just here I am today still making video games.
Did you stick with Unity for Slimekeep?
Yes, I've not tried another engine really ever. I mean, I've tried some, but I've never really. I pretty much just stuck with Unity for 9 years now. You kind of just start with it, and then you're like, well, I know it pretty well now that I don't know if I want to make a switch to another game engine.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel that way. Did you have any fears? Last year they announced the runtime fees and kind of some of that stuff that developers just really push back against. Did you worry about that at all with Slimekeep?
I mean, with Slimekeep particularly, I wasn't necessarily scared of the runtime fee and stuff, because I wasn't expecting it to make over $100,000, and that's when the runtime fee would kick in. And um and so I wasn't scared in that sense, because I was like, oh, this probably won't affect me. But I was more in the sense scared in the sense that, like, oh boy, Unity is kind of this big corporation and they're trying to take all this money from us. And the runtime fee was just ridiculous. And I think so many people felt the
Yeah.
same way. And so even if it wasn't, even though that it did get reverted, it was more just kind of revealing the true capitalistic, intentions of Unity and such. And so that was obviously scary and led, so many people to switch to Godot. And I've also, definitely should probably give Godot a try at some point, but it's just, when it's so hard to let go of Unity when I just feel like I know it so well and I don't want to abandon it. Like, I'm sure some people, so I'm sure some skills transfer over, obviously, but it's yeah, definitely a scary, thought when it's like this tool that I've been using. If Unity goes out of business someday or something, what's going to happen? I don't know, but that was, I think, a scary development for a lot of Unity developers, and kind of changed a lot of people's mind on the company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think it like a lot of people feel like you of like I have too much time invested, but if nothing else, they let a lot of people to be like, well, I've got, one foot out the door just in case. And
Yep.
so people are going to be more ready to leave the next time if they do something, worse or don't roll back the things that they tried to implement the first time or something like
Mhm.
that. For someone that is watching that is just super new to game dev and is interested in getting into it, where do you think they should start?
I think the biggest thing is probably just I would say start off watching a few tutorials, just basic stuff about Unity well, not Unity, any game engine of your choosing, or just choose one and go for it. Godot, Unity, whatever you want to do. Don't get too caught up on the choosing the best engine and the best tools and everything. It's more important just to make stuff. And then watch a few basic tutorials, and then I'd say kind of diving in the deep end and just throwing yourself in and trying to make something is honestly the best way to learn, I think. And so just kind of start with some really small games and being like, I want to make this game. And then, you know, kind of go from there and being like, okay, well, I want to make Flappy Bird. How do I do that? And just, don't be afraid to Google stuff and watch tutorials at the beginning and just make a bunch of small games to uh, build your skill sets up. And it might feel kind of redundant. You might feel like you're not learning anything at the beginning and it's like you're making no progress, but just actually forcing yourself to kind of dive in the deep end is the best way to learn. And it's hard to say that when you've never programmed before and you've never made a game and you're just like, I don't even know where to start. I don't even know, you know, what to do at all. But just making these small games and building your skills up, don't be ambitious. I think many people have said this, don't make your dream game and don't try to do anything super like, oh, I want to make an MMO RPG as my first game because you're probably what's going to happen 9 out of 10 times is you're just going to start making it and you're going to have no clue what you're doing and then you're going to get really demotivated and then quit and then never come back to game development just because you kind of this is kind of uh, got running too quickly. So definitely try to avoid that and just say, build your skills up slowly and surely, and that's the best way to be prepared.
Yeah, that's sadly kind of a quintessential experience is like everyone dreams of, making the next version of their favorite game, which is like some AAA monster.
Mhm.
But once you get in there and you start to realize what scope actually means and set your sights way lower, that helps. Do you think picking an engine matters at first, or should they just pick any of them and go?
Honestly, no. Just choose one because the thing that so many people do, I mean, me included, whenever I'm trying to learn a new thing is, for example, when I was recently trying to kind of learn web development and such, just on the side, there's so many different frameworks and there's so many different libraries and programming languages. It's just such a mess. And you're like, I don't even know what to do. And so people kind of, and me included, just get lost in their like in decision paralysis. And they're like, well, I got to choose they feel the need to choose the best possible choice and the best, things like, well, I want to do this thing I mean, this goes for literally learning everything. If you're trying to like learn how to make music, a lot of people are like, well, I do FL Studio or Ableton or whatever other options there are. Like I want to, spend all this time Googling like, what do these professionals use? And then you'll see like, oh, some people use this and some people use this. Like, I don't know which one to choose. And all that just prevents you from actually making games. So you just have to choose one and just go for it. And, you know, at the end of the day, it all transfers, somewhat, at least. So it's not like everything you learn in one software isn't going to translate to something else. So just choose something, just like choose Unity or choose Godot. Like I would just say if you want to just do like simple 2D games, just go with Godot. If you want to do fancy 3D games, just go with Unreal. Or if you want to do something in the middle, or you're not sure, just choose Unity and just don't even think about it again. Just go for it. And yeah, just don't get caught up in the decision or getting started. That's the worst thing you can do is, you know, getting stuck before you even start doing anything. So just choose something and get with it.
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it. Don't get stuck before you even start. I think that's super helpful. Just pick something and get something moving on the
Yep.
screen. Um, Now, in addition to all of your game dev success, you've also got a super successful YouTube channel, which has nearly 80,000 subscribers. You're one of the biggest YouTube game devs on YouTube. So, how are you able to balance both making videos and games, which are both pretty time consuming endeavors?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not an easy process at all. And I would say I've kind of changed my philosophies a lot and how I kind of approach making videos and such. Is I used to just, I think, record, for Slimekeep, I would just record for 3 weeks of footage, and then I'd like edit for 1 week to make the video. And now I kind of think I'm focusing a bit more on just the game development side for at least this next project. But overall, it is a tough balance. And as I said earlier, game development is hard enough, and throwing YouTube on top of that and trying to have a consistent upload schedule is also, hard too. So it just makes things even harder. And then you have other things in life you have to manage. So it takes a lot of time management skills, and just kind of balancing everything, when to work on what and when to, do this. I think prior to, early on in Slimekeep, I was definitely focused a bit more on my upload schedule and making sure to have really consistent videos. And I still am trying to be as consistent as possible, but I think I'm thinking a little less about um, my video process now, and I'd really just want to focus on making, my next project while still showcasing it and still making videos, of course. And I'm not going to stop that, but I think overall, it is difficult to do both, and it's not the right path for everyone. So, running this YouTube channel, yeah, it has its pros and cons. Like obviously, you get tons of feedback and everything from people, but yeah, you just kind of have to know what you're getting into, and yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, this is kind of related to earlier you talking about just how YouTube's changed. But I think your channel and a lot of the biggest channels like Thomas Brush or Jonas Tyroller, all of their biggest videos are 2, 3, 4 years old.
It's not.
So what are you finding in 2025 that is working for you, even if the views aren't quite as lucrative as they used to be?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of just I try my best to not. I mean, I obviously try to make thumbnails and titles that have, are appealing and such, but I also try to focus more on the games themselves, at least for now, than the videos themselves. Because, there's some people that I think it, it depends on your priorities, and there's no right or wrong way of doing things, but I think I'm more of a game developer than a YouTuber, or at least that's how I feel right now, when some people are maybe more of a
Hmm.
YouTuber than a game developer. So they maybe, make video games
Sure.
with the intention of turning it into like a very clickable title or something. Like I know some of my most popular videos were like, I made the hardest game or I made the easiest game. And you're like, what is that? And then, you kind of click on it and it has a very catchy title and that such. And so there's definitely some channels out there that are very successful on YouTube that have kind of, I guess, focused more on the YouTube side of things and, creating content like video game development is their medium for content creation, and they're kind of, YouTubers first. And so I think if you want to, again, just depends on your priorities, what you want to do. Like if you want to, you know, try to get the most views possible, I would say don't do what I'm doing, because I kind of just showcased my progress, and that's not always like the most interesting thing. My most popular videos are often my videos where it's like a game jam or I do some kind of challenge thing, which makes sense because, those are more what the YouTube algorithm likes. They would prefer that over than me just talking about the development progress of this new project and such. So depends on what you want to do with YouTube and how you want to approach it, I'd say.
Yeah, speaking of your older videos, your most popular video on the channel is called I Made a Game with ChatGPT, and that was over 2 years ago. So you were really ahead of the curve on like this kind of vibe coding movement. But what I'm just curious about is how are you thinking about AI and its use in game dev and kind of just in your workflow?
Yeah, I think there's some new tools that are coming out, at least now, for Unity that allow for like an AI assistant built in, and I haven't tried any of them out, but I probably should. And I mean, I think I mean, I'm definitely optimistic towards AI. I would say I'm not super crazy about every single aspect of it because, there's environmental impacts and there's I think some people maybe have an over reliance and, you know, just or don't even try to learn anything. They just try to vibe code everything and just ask AI for everything. And I think as with everything in life, it's kind of a balance. And so for me, I mean, I definitely use it to debug some stuff and write some small pieces of code now. I'll just ask ChatGPT for that. But at the end of the day, it's so important to know how your code works because if you don't know how your code works or the architecture works, then it's going to create kind of a mess down the line and your code will just be unmaintainable. So I would like to be optimistic towards it because at the end of the day, I think, it kind of is the future and you kind of have to embrace it, whether you like it or not, because it's going to change things. And I don't want to be like a denier of it at all. But I mean, there's definitely concerns and, it is scary because I think at least for me, game development is a very creative medium. It's kind of like an art form to me. And I don't necessarily want to, have a bunch of AI sloth games overtake everything and it's also kind of weird because from a developer point of view, you're kind of like, I just spent, my whole life learning, how to program. And it's like, is this even useful anymore? Because, someone who's never programmed before can just ask ChatGPT to just make this game for them and such. And so that's a little scary. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, programmers are still very necessary and game development still, requires a lot of creativity. But it'll definitely just be interesting to see how AI changes the game development landscape in general and how it changes just the software development, every, landscape in general.
Yeah, I think having a balanced take is what we have to do. Like a lot of the things you pointed out. It's here to stay, but it's not like a perfect magical thing. We have to, think about some things like environmental concerns and even just like the learning you lose, like you mentioned, if you just never actually learn but just vibe code, you're gonna hit a snag eventually. And so developers are still needed, luckily. Um, is there anything that I have not asked you about that you feel like you either would just have a lot to teach people about or just that you have like big opinions on?
Let me think about this for a second here. Trying to think. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's something that I can think of. I mean, I think I've said kind of a lot of the things that I've strongly opinionated on. Kind of I've touched on them already, but I guess just a few things I can think of off the top of my head would just be at the end of the day, you know, game development. It's you kind of sometimes I think people get caught up in trying to be the best game developer and such, and try to make the best code. And I agree, it's very important to make clean, reusable code, and I try to preach that on my channel. But at the end of the day, the user doesn't actually, interact with the code or see the code that you wrote for your game. So it depends on your priorities. Like if you want to make really, technically sound games with really, clean backends and that's really valuable to you, like go for it. But if you're like me and you just want to make video games and that's what you're passionate about, I would say just don't get too caught up in all this, jargon and such. Like just make games. At the end of the day, I'd rather just make a game that has a kind of sloppy backend than spend all this time writing the most clean systems and whatnot without actually, releasing anything and focusing on that. So I don't mean to say um don't focus on writing clean systems, but I would just say, at the end of the day, just focus on if you want to make games and that's what you really want to do. Just consider like the fact that you don't always need to be the most super technically advanced. You just kind of need to know enough to do what you want to do. And that's kind of where I feel like I am. And so I think some people might just get caught up in trying to learn every single function and every single aspect of their engine when it's not really necessary. And, at the end of the day, it's just having dedication and passion and working on something and motivation to work on something, can kind of outweigh some of these other factors, I think. So that's one thing I think I would say, and it's kind of a piece of advice to some people.
Yeah, it can be so easy to get caught up in just optimization for optimization's sake. So just focusing on what the end user is actually going to experience is so
Yeah.
helpful. Now I'll end us with one final topic here. So I made this podcast that I'm calling it the Dev Dream Podcast, mostly because I kind of dream of making my own games, but I've given up on game dev a couple times in the past. And so I'm just doing it to talk to incredibly creative people like you to help inspire me. And so I'm just curious, what would you say is your dream in terms of game dev in this season of life?
I think, yeah, my at least for where I am now, I mean, just post Slimekeep, or at least where I am now, is just my dream is to just do a lot of fun small projects, because as I've realized, Slimekeep was a great experience and I don't regret it at all. But as I've said many times, you don't need to spend 5 years on a project to make something really cool. You can do really cool games and have all these new ideas and bring them to life in 3 months or 6 months or a year or less. And so just I'm excited to try smaller projects and, maybe try some new types of genres of games. And maybe I'm not doing that right now, as my next game is kind of also a roguelike. So, oh well. And it also is kind of a pixel art game. And it is similar to what I do. But in the future, I'm definitely excited to kind of branch out and hopefully just try new things and learn new things and just do smaller projects that, are still impactful at the end of the day and still create for fun experiences, and, just focusing on, the core gameplay loops of that. And so that's what I think I'm probably most excited to work on in the future, and, you know, just explore more of what game development has to offer, and branch out a bit.
Well, that's a super cool dream. I hope that it can become a reality for you. Ben, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me
No
today.
problem. Thank you so much for having me on, Blake. Really appreciate it.
And we'll end our recording.